How might we activate this thing? Maybe we can figure out the potential process. So a couple years have passed since the release of the Deep Dark, and it was a cool update where we got something in the center here, which is more than likely pointing towards the signs of it being a portal with a lot of the discussions and leaks and so on. But we don't know how to activate this thing. And I was getting frustrated with the slow sort of movement towards it. So I wanted to look it into this whole thing myself. And I believe that I might have discovered elements or features that are required to activate this central structure that I wanted to share. So to provide some context first, while looking into and like reading up on everything, there are three variants of this middle piece. And the one that I have in front of me is one that I feel like highlights this exploration that I'm going to provide of how to activate this thing. And before I jump into it, an important leak was this one, which is apparently an in development game, which is a sequel to Minecraft Dungeons. And within it, you can see the portal is activated and a big screaming man, which is very tall, about the height of the portal potentially. And um, yeah, but time passed as well. Not much development happened in terms of new discoveries, but the actual game itself might come out in the second quarter of this year. And then I wanted to look back at that because, like, when I was looking around, it's like, oh, well, hang on a second. A lot of these videos have gotten taken down, and some people have censored their stuff, and I guess it's an important screenshot if that's the case. So I guess it's a bit risky to make this video as well, but fuck it, whatever. This is literally a new channel in my first video, so it doesn't really matter. So I guess subscribe to see if I'm still around or get taken down. But moving on, there is something that I didn't see brought much attention to, which was the fact that there are no blocks here, and then there is a block that we don't have, and then this guy is holding something like an amethyst something, which might be like an amethyst based tool or like a tuning fork or something. I don't really know. But these are either jukeboxes or note blocks. Now, these note blocks, there are seemingly one, two, three, four, five, six, maybe seven or more. And then on top of them, you can see a coloration change through the rainbow. Now, note blocks change colors as you sort of sequence through them. Um, so there's initial guess of like, okay, maybe it goes backwards through the color spectrum and then it's back to whatever. And then you have to play some kind of song that activates the portal. And it didn't really feel right with any of these things. And I was just like scrolling through different or listening through different chords. And while I was trying to figure out what sort of song would play in the sequence to activate this thing, in relation to chords that go backwards through the color spectrum, nothing really lined up while I was going through a lot of them. And I was thinking for a while, and then while I was chilling on here, a song plays in ambiance in the deep dark called Ancestry, and it happened to play at the time. And Ancestry actually goes through in a certain section of its track. It goes through a crescendo of notes, which I believe is going through A to G. And when that played, I was like, oh, okay, that's probably what we have to put in here. And there might be enough notes in there. And then also within that soundtrack, which I'll play now, you'll hear just at the very end that there might be something like a hint to like a whoosh sound. And that whoosh sound might be the activation of the portal. Another sort of hints within this game, like track 5, also hint towards other elements that might support activation of the portal. Like you need specific things like amethyst or maybe something like glass, but glass sometimes sounds like ice. And I'll jump into chimes as well, and why I've chosen ice as the substitute within this section here. But let's first activate and set the requirements for this sort of note structure that we need to use to activate the portal. So let's get these notes here. So first up would go 3, which is A, then B, which is 5, then C, which is 6, then D, which is 8, then E, which is 10, then F, which is 11, then G, which is 13. Alright, now the portal hasn't activated, unfortunately, because, well, we're missing some of the vital components, and being, well, this block that we still don't have access to, as well as potentially a tool, but this might be one of the factors that are required to activate this portal, or maybe all we need if we had all those elements. And it's also hinted in the soundtrack within here. Now, why have I picked chimes as the instrument of choice? Well, within one of the structures that actually has a note block within it is this thing over here, which is the ice block, ice box, I guess. And they play chimes here, which is actually sneakily hidden in terms of how it's influenced, that note block's influence. If you break these, you can actually see that it's influencing and activating these to make a chime noise. And this is packed ice. Packed ice is the only block currently that can play chimes. So I believe that the instrument of choice within the Deep Dark in terms of thematics is chimes. And while only concept art, there seems to be implementation or exploration of the idea of chimes within the Deep Dark. I guess instead of chimes as an individually new block, they're using note blocks instead in its place in the final product. And chimes also has a very similar sort of sound to something like amethyst. So let's go ahead and get that. And chimes also sound like breaking glass, which is a sound that you can hear within track 5, breaking glass at some point. And for context for this, it's a certain section within the near end of the song where if you reverse it, it sounds like breaking glass. And I'll also play the section where amethyst is placed. So basically, I think there's a hint going on between breaking glass, or something that sounds like it, being more packed ice, and then its sort of comparison to it of chimes, or amethyst. So these sounds are pretty similar. So I believe whatever you would put underneath of the block might have the same sort of tuning as chimes. And what is chimes? It is F7. And you'll notice now that 7 has been an important repeating number. So whatever this thing is might be F7 or higher, or some sort of chime-related instrument. Now, if it's something higher, then it could be going into frequencies beyond, because chimes are actually pretty high in the frequency scale in terms of highest notation, so to go into something like 8 or whatever. So is that all that would be required to activate this portal? And is there any sort of additional information that we can learn? And I believe there could be, because I was also wondering, like, okay, is that all we have to do? We have to play this sequence, maybe play it in this thing, and it's well in reach of something like an instrument that we can play. And then what does this make this thing? Like a portal, but also like a giant instrument or organ that we can play, as in like a cathedral's instrumental organ rather than a sensory organ. And if you actually go into the Minecraft's channel, they talk about when they're discussing concepts and backstory behind the Skulk, they talk about one of the developers speaking about how different sections of the Skulk are sensory organs, and they use the term organ. So in relation to the hypothetical of an instrumental based organ, I guess the pun would be intended, or maybe came across their mind in development as something that could occur. But with the current design in front of us, is that all that is required to activate this thing? That could be the case, and that just might be it, and no other additional system is required. But on the chance that there could be more required to activate this portal, let's explore that. So now looking into additional things that could occur, like what is the purpose of these things here? There's a lot of things that line up with this thing. For example, like skulls, and that you can find around the city, as well as like wall blocks that also align with this thing, and also like beacons, as in the light beam that comes off it, as you can see it in other sort of implementations throughout the game beyond just the beacon. And maybe they could go through this thing. Maybe that could be the case. There's just a line of beacons like when this thing activates. And I only bring up beacon beams because other people have speculated that that could be an element, but I feel like I'm a bit more against it because beacons beams usually need access to the sky, and there's this circumstance is it's under the ground, so it look weird if you're above ground to see that. However, whatever process this thing activates, it then opens up and then it goes the color of something similar to amethyst. I guess it's sort of pinky or purpley. Well, it's hitting that kind of spectrum. And I think it could actually involve amethyst itself. And I'll explain why I feel more confident in this being the case. Um, so if it is involving amethyst itself on this portal structure, how does it interact comparatively to different portals? Now, interestingly, as a feature, I don't know why this is the case, but this sort of whole entire space here has empty space with this sort of here as empty space that an additional structure or portal can appear. So I don't know if the portal specifically appears within here, this sort of bounding area, because also when you look at an activated portal and how it looks, seemingly a darker line of deep slate is occurring, of reinforced deep slate might be occurring, but it seems to be in front of it, as in the portal-like block, or light bleeding over to the other blocks. But if it's in front of it, is there any sort of evidence of a highlighting of a width of 3? And I believe there is down here as well. There's a width of 3, this being the center. So if this is activated, there seems to be breathing room for the expansion of 3 blocks. So then maybe something is required to be placed here to make this into a functional instrument of sorts. And what I'm holding in my hand is a calibrated scope sensor, which coincidentally, if you place it right here, and I'll note that this corner also works, is within the range of activation from the furthest block here. So a signal is being sent. However, if we move to the edge here, and then we get some reinforced deep slate, and then place this right here, or if I move this thing any deeper on the lower section, and then go ahead and try that again, it's no longer within activation range. So literally just on the edge of influence from a calibrated Skulk has a sphere of influence of 16. So all around it can be affected. But regular Skulk only has influence of 8. And within the soundtrack of, the disc of 5, you can hear sounds of Amethyst and its application potentially for portal activation, which could just be the using of this sort of instrument here, or this has been pre-placed by the player, and this thing now becomes something like a playable instrument. So now that I'm in survival mode, I can maybe play this thing like an instrument, which I can, and this thing responds accordingly, sending out signals to this thing. So while these might all be coincidence, I feel like there's just a lot of lineups going on here in terms of just the leaks that we currently have, and then a lot of design elements that exist within the pre-existing structures as well that point towards something like a 1 to 7 sequence of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then playing those notes that somehow have relation to here, and then the just reach of skulk resonance being within that sphere of influence to playing these as a note. And maybe this could be the minimum required things that would be required for portal activation. But let's explore if there is additional sort of hints or features or factors that could be added on top of this if this is a system that could be occurring for portal activation. There is another feature that has been added to the game which was just added and then kind of forgotten about. As in, surprisingly online, there wasn't too many videos that go into depth about it. But I don't really know if it has application within here, but it still plays to the sort of discussion that's occurring right now, which is something like, can a sequence or resonance of noise that might potentially go beyond a pitch or some sort of like spectrum of notes to be played somehow cause a rift or portal to open because something to do with sound and resonance, like a harmony. Um, and there is a factor around Skulk called Skulk resonance, where if you put an amethyst block, once again, an importance of amethyst within, I guess, soundtracks in relation to this portal, which is also kind of pinky and purpley as well, um, then it might, maybe it has some relation to this, but I'm not so sure. But Skulk resonance lets it repeat or echo a sound. So something like when you, I don't have to put it all behind there, but you can hear that the sound is so weird or instrumental sounding whenever this thing is echoing or repeating. And the importance of both echoing and repeating and sound and resonance, as well as the coloration of something that is pretty close to amethyst, I feel like there's enough sort of through line concepts here that is spread around the ancient city that there might be some sort of weight to this, of amethyst's inclusion in a portal activation process. So, can we find any example of amethyst potentially having some sort of relation to echoes beyond this as well? I think we kind of can. And I think what we are seeing within some of these chests, let me see if I could find one actually. There we go, I found one. So if the application of Skulk and Amethyst is being infused into each other, let's shut these guys up. So if this is some sort of thing that can occur, then what happens to Amethyst after prolonged exposure or some sort of sequence that could occur? Maybe it can turn into something like an echo shard because we're playing with things in a way that can echo noises and combination of Skulk and Amethyst. Then maybe this is just Amethyst corrupted by Skulk, turning into an echo shard. So I believe that maybe that is further signs of some sort of importance to it, where basically amethyst can be converted into echo shards through some kind of process, since there is already, I guess, implementation or of mechanics that involved echoing and resonance in combination with Skulk. So I guess with these elements of a harmonic playing of notes through 1 to 7, A to B, Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, blah, 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 when that happens, this thing activates. And it could just be note blocks, but is there any significance to discs? And yes, we've discussed 5, 11, and 13. 5, 11, and 13 are within the sequence that we have between A to G. And 13 is, well, the last one here. So there could potentially be more discs to come, like 3, 6, 8, and 10, which could, instead of being plugged into here like discs and instead of jukeboxes, could just be its additional lore counterpart where you could play them and learn additional sort of factors about Minecraft lore. And or they could be plugged into here. But I don't really get the colors and stuff like that, since I guess some of these discs are not really representative of a color so much. Like black, I don't know. Could be. And I also want to include the implementation of redstone systems into this thing as well, since below this structure is the exploration of quite intricate redstone mechanics that are pre-generated into the structure. So if that's the case, then I assume it might be either a just general lore, why it's in there, or it might somehow tie into a system, like making this jukebox sort of system that activates a portal more mechanical rather than manual. And the first sort of attempt is a faster paced version, and then the right side attempt is sort of trying to tie these into more mechanically appropriate pacing of these things. But let's explore the left side first. And that last sort of like playing of all the notes at once was sort of just a additional thing that I believe might be something that could happen as well. Like maybe you'll have to just play them all at once. But if it is required for all these notes to be played at once, then potentially mechanical elements might be needed. Or play them in sequence or something, but or maybe it happens after you go through all of them. And now the next one I'll play. So you notice when you play this one, everything gets lit up at a correct pace. But compared to this sort of faster one, it's a lot more messier. I want to tie together some loose ends that I still have in terms of questions about this design of the portal, and I've gone ahead and redesigned it and implemented my solutions to some of these issues that I had. And first up is that within the activated portal, in the original sort of design that it comes as, which is just the reinforced deep slate surrounding it, it doesn't make sense that these sort of indents or recessions where teeth kind of occur have sort of this light bleed portal effect around them. And I was kind of struggling to figure that out in terms of like placement of things and whatever that really made sense. But what kind of did line up for me is that if you also potentially trim the reinforced deep slate's exterior with a layer of amethyst, it might be able to uh, be representative of that sort of light bleed that would occur when this portal is fully activated, and it also incorporates that those areas into activation now as well. So I've added that, and then one more thing that I've added as well is that, well, skulk sensors are actually waterloggable. So if you waterlog this thing, it can also maybe be considered that you could have some sort of other substance like a portal that could still fairly run within the predefined area, but instead you're still sort of trimming it with amethyst. And then moving the amethyst or these sections still, instead of from here, I've moved it to here, it's still activatable by the furthest reaching things. But it can also still play within those concepts of echoing. And instead of having the calibrated skulk sensors, I've put shriekers here because once again it feels thematically relevant for a screaming mouth that has harmonic sort of qualities to it to uh, if you have all of these things going on, I wouldn't be surprised with all these magical elements that maybe like the bouncing around of sound, the screaming of dead souls, harmonic resonance, as well as a full trim of amethyst that also amplifies sound effects. And then you're also tying in potentially something like all notes from A to G, as well as high pitched frequencies and so on. And then you play that, what would occur? And I wouldn't be surprised if mechanically something like a portal could appear. A tear or a rift caused by harmonic resonance as well as the screams of the dead, and then maybe even all this skulk gets sucked up into this as fuel. But it's important to note that the artwork here might be occurring in the past because the coloration of the flames here are natural flames rather than soul flames, and these could be netherrack and so on. But there is also no skulk in the area as well. And you'd kind of have to wonder, how do we first breach a lot of these dimensions that are found within Minecraft? And then what came first, the chicken or the egg? Because we also have a statue of something that appears similar to a warden. And how did they get these things to make this portal? Because it's using reinforced deep slate, which has properties that are similar to that of a catalyst with the same sort of bone, with the same sort of um, slight colorations of teal within it as well. And basically, I don't really know the answer to this. And then what's the deal with this guy? He seems to be potentially like the warden, but not. He's got like huge ass piano teeth, and maybe things that might be also taking inspiration out of cathedral based organs, and then like tooting fork ears and a slightly different mouth and so on. But this guy is like insanely giant, and I think he could be something like the giantness of a cathedral organ. So this guy might have sort of thematic relation to that. So maybe everything within the Skulk dimension might be instrument based or music based. The Deep Dark greatly disempowers the player. Any sort of protective measures that we attempt to take against the things that originate from Skulk are greatly ineffective, and if there are threats greater than the Warden waiting on the other side as well, this place that all this Skulk and corruption is originating from potentially, then you'd have to wonder, is the air that these vibrations are passing through in such a corrupted area even breathable? And are there even any protective measures that we can take against this? And could that be something like an oxygenation process? But something like that would require us to wait to figure that out, just like the process itself. So all we can do is just let time pass and hope to figure things out. I hope you enjoyed this speculative video, and maybe one day we'll figure out how to get to the other side.